you're unclean, you're this, you're that, and then that's when the kicking and the punching and tearing our clothes off and stuff came about.
I said, honey, what's the matter? And he didn't talk. He did not talk. He didn't speak. So I sat beside him and I held him, and I held him, and I held him, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried.
I'm almost 60 years old. I've carried this for over 45 years. And today I want to reconcile. I want to let go.
The 1970s. It was a different time. Transform the excitement of high-speed car chases, breaking and entering, into a love of paddling a canoe 50 miles across a lake or learning to survive in the woods. That was the idea. It was from this dock in the mid-1970s that troubled young offenders, most of whom were Indigenous, were relocated to remote camps in northern Saskatchewan. It was a program called Wilderness Challenge, and it was considered a promising new way to modify behavior. Teenage boys were sent to those camps, some indefinitely, but for at least a year. In this thesis, author Neil Armitage described which boys would be most appropriate. Children who have average or higher intelligence, children between the ages of 13 and 19, children who are physically healthy, children whose behavior disorders are characterized by extreme hyperactivity, dangerous impulsive delinquencies, violence, uncontrollable running. Armitage not only wrote the thesis that Wilderness Challenge was based on, he directed the program for Saskatchewan's Ranch-Erlo Society. Ranch-Erlo is and was a respected provider of social services in Saskatchewan. But in 1977, the Ranch-Erlo Society's name took a hit. Boys brought forward allegations of beatings, withholding food and shelter, and also humiliation. Their license was pulled by the province. But for some former campers, the wounds haven't healed. Guy Dumas is now in his 50s and was just a teen when he spent over a year in the camp at Norbert Lake, Saskatchewan. And today, he is starting a journey through the past. He drove to Winnipeg from Manitoulin Island, Ontario for our road trip, and his wife Elfrida Trudeau is along for support. APTN Investigates is off to Dauphin, Manitoba, where Dumas will reunite with Richard Yarema. The men haven't set eyes on each other since 1976, when they both stayed at the wilderness camp.
You ready for all this?
I don't know. Are you?
Let's do it.
Okay.
That's the way it gets done.
Yarema wrote APTN a letter outlining the abuse he and others suffered at the camp. You wrote us a letter at APTN Investigates. Why did you do that?
Well, I was at a point in my life where I had just come off of some major surgery, and this was a chance to make things right.
Yarema wrote other letters about the camp abuse as well. Back then, he says he wrote his mother Pearl Yarema often, but she never received one of them.
He had writing paper and everything else. I said, write home, keep in touch. Apparently he wrote to us, but we never received a letter, not even the one. And that was heartbreaking, you know. Because if we would have even received one letter stating the kind of condition that he was in and how he was mistreated, and had we got even one letter, we would have been out there.
But her son's recent open-heart surgery led to a key discovery. Incredibly, Urema thinks he suffered a heart attack at age 16 when he was at the camp. He and another boy tried to escape.
He had taken off probably maybe for a day. Maybe we had 24-hour head start on him. But it wasn't enough. They had a plane, so they got ahead of us, and they canoed back, and they caught us. So we had to do that whole canoe ride back with them, because they didn't take us back in the plane. They took us back in the canoe. They yelled at us the whole way while we were back. So it was building up to something. And then when we got on shore, oh, you're unclean, you're this, you're that, and then that's when the kicking and the punching and tearing our clothes off and stuff came about.
Next, staff cut their hair. Then he says he was forced to dig a pit for hours.
Here's your boots. Here's your gotch. Get in the hole. Here's a shovel. Dig me a hole. So you can't reach to the top. And while I was digging it, I fell to the side. And when I fell to the side, I died. Basically, for a better word. Because I remember being floating on top.
Finally, a staff member ordered him out of the pit after he collapsed.
So that's the part I remember. I thought it was a hallucination. I don't know what it was to this day, but whatever it was, that's what it was. He said, I told him my chest was sore. He told me, get to bed. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, go to bed. Your punishment's over.
He recalled he'd been without sleep for about 50 hours. Fast forward 40 years later. Richard says when he awoke from open-heart surgery, his surgeon posed a curious question.
When you were 16, did you have a heart attack? He said, for sure I had a scar on my chest, like on the inside of my heart. He says it shouldn't be there.
A representative told us that Richard's surgeon declined to comment. Guy Dumas had a similar experience in camp. Dumas was forced to go on a hike in spite of being feverish, in and out of consciousness, and sweating profusely.
I collapsed 2 or 3 times on the way back. And when I got back to camp, there was nobody there. And I went straight to my bunk, and I probably slept for 2-3 days. Did anyone check on me? No one checked on me. I don't recall anyone checking on me. You know, I went to my bunk. Of course, the youth would come and check, but none of the counselors ever came to see how I was doing. The youth were more concerned about me than the counselors. Yeah. And to me, that particular incident demonstrated to me that whoever these counselors were didn't have the ability or even the capability to be named as a counselor.
So how was it that in Canada, in the mid-70s, this kind of mistreatment could go on? Well, in 1977, the programs did become a news story. Opposition MLA Gary Lane tabled notes from an RCMP and Saskatchewan government investigation. In it were allegations of cruelty and abuse like Dumas and Urema recall. A Royal Commission of Inquiry was called after much debate. 51 witnesses were called, but just 13 boys. Although a statement Urema wrote was entered into evidence, neither Urema or Dumas were asked to testify.
Until you called me, Chris, that was the only time I became aware that there was an inquiry.
4 sisters, and the family's always been close.
The camps were shut down after that, but the damage had been done.
I didn't quite recognize him at all, like his mannerism. He was quiet, kind of reserved, and he didn't want to talk about anything.
And one day she found Richard down in the basement.
He was cowered in a corner, and he had his hands like this. And he was hiding, like he made himself so tiny. And it really upset me. So I said to him, I said, honey, what's the matter? And he didn't talk. He did not talk. He didn't speak. So I sat beside him, and I held him, and I held him, and I held him. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And then all of a sudden he goes, Mom. I said, are you okay, Rick? He said, yeah, why? And I said, nothing. I said, nothing, Rick, nothing. I'm just glad you're yourself again. And he had moments like that, where he would do that. Like he would isolate himself so bad, and he would just cower, like really cower, like almost afraid, like shaking. Because he was shaking when he was cowering himself like this. And I told my husband about it, and he said, oh my God, what did they do to him up there? He said, I wonder what happened to him.
Coming up, the inquiry that threw the investigation under the bus.
I don't want to be responsible for saying that this is an okay treatment place for juvenile boys. They were being beaten, they were being hit, they were not listened to, nobody wanted to talk to them, but mostly the discipline was so brutal. It was really, really hard to listen to when they talked about, you know, black eyes, things they were forced to eat, being humiliated. If they did something wrong, they would have to stand naked in front of the group, and then the others would shout different things at them because of what they had done. And each one of them had gone through, you know, humiliation in different ways like that with the staff.
Linda Hope was a mid-career social worker in the Department of Northern Saskatchewan back in the 70s. And one day she got a call from RCMP about a boy named Donnie Peterson. Peterson has since died.
Well, the RCMP contacted me, about what did I know that was going on because of Donnie Peterson and the things that he kept saying, because he would get away and then he'd get caught and then he would tell all these stories. And finally, the RCMP did drop in a couple of times and made me aware that things were not great there, or at least they were concerned because of what Donnie was saying. They weren't saying it was true, but they thought we needed to check it further.
Hope traveled to the camps with the RCMP to interview boys. The mistreatment she heard about is echoed by Richard Urema and Guy Dumas.
So then I went out a couple of times after that, and that's when I started to interview the boys that were there, and that's where I got the stories of the brutality. And then I went back to the director and said, I'm not going to be responsible for licensing this program. It's not appropriate, it's wrong. And there was a bunch of waffling going on, but I said, if you want to, then it's on your head. I don't want to be responsible for saying that this is an okay treatment place for juvenile boys.
What was it like to make the decision to say something like that to your boss?
Difficult. And of course it was a white male world. So again, that I would be questioning this was not appropriate. It was not right. But you know, it was wrong to me, and I had to stand up and say something about it.
She believed the boys she interviewed at the camp.
Well, I felt that they were being truthful, that they all gave the same stories in different ways about what had happened to them or what they had seen happen to the others. And they all, because I interviewed them separately, they couldn't know what the other one was saying. They didn't know what I was going to do with this information, but it seemed that they were relieved that somebody was actually going to listen to them. No.
APTN Investigates spoke to 4 former workers at the camps. None agreed to be interviewed on camera, and all described the RCMP and Linda Hope's visit as a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. The version of things that I get from people who worked there is that the boys sort of got the sense when you showed up and the police showed up that, hey, this was their big chance to really get out of this place and get back at the guys that were keeping them there.
Yeah.
Do you think that there was any of that?
No.
She felt compelled to warn social agencies across the country doing placements at the camps.
Some of them withdrew and some of them didn't.
And given the more than $48 per diem the camps were getting, she didn't see much evidence of counseling. She got the camp's license pulled, but her reactions and even her gender would be used against her in the 1977 inquiry that eventually followed. And it led to a terrible time in her life. Hope testified for 3 days. In the inquiry report, she was described as emotional. She and a co-worker were even referred to as girls in this inquiry transcript obtained by APTN Investigates. Judge Maher, now deceased, authored the final report. It cleared the Rancherlo Society of wrongdoing and found the decision to close the camps was unjustified. Maher also took aim at the RCMP, Eugene David, Hope's boss at the Department of Northern Saskatchewan, and even Hope herself. The camps remained closed, but the damage to some of the campers had already been done.
It taught me never to be intimidated by anybody ever again. No fear. I mean, none, zero. Doesn't matter. Obviously, you know, fighting people and getting some assault charges out of it, that wasn't very good. And then drinking. As soon as I got out, I was only 17, but first place I went was the bar after I seen my family. And I just didn't stay, I don't think I stayed a day sober for about 10 years. I went on a 10-year bench.
Richard Yarema and Guy Dumas never got to tell their story. In Rancherlo's 2004 History of Itself, Go Forward with Pride, stories like the one Dumas and Yarema tell are described as made up. So APTN Investigates asked them directly.
Whereas if they didn't have a job, I mean,
Malcolm Neal is Vice President of Residential Services.
Do you believe that the boys who spoke out were telling made-up stories?
I haven't spoken to any of the boys about any of their experiences at Wilderness Challenge. I understand that the allegations were investigated by the RCMP, and then there was the public inquiry. So I don't know if they were made up or not made up. I wasn't there. I can't really comment on that.
Is it your sense that that is the consensus, though, within Rancherlo, that they were made-up stories? I mean, this is in the official book.
We didn't really spend a lot of time talking about the allegations. We talked about how we were going to make sure the ranch was a better place for young people from here on in.
Richard Yarema had open-heart surgery recently. After the operation, the surgeon made a note on the chart, and he told Yarema that he had seen scarring evidence on the heart indicating Richard had a heart attack when he was about 16 years old. Richard says he was in camp at 16. He was made to dig a pit for a number of hours. He was awake for about 50 hours total and collapsed with chest pains in the pit. He was told by staffers it was nothing to go to bed, where he did go, and he stayed for a couple of days. What is your response to that allegation?
That sounds abusive. That is not something that anyone at Rancherlo would endorse today. I have no reason not to believe Mr. Yarema. I don't know if he's told that story to the authorities, but I would implore that he make a complaint to the police, because that's totally inappropriate.
Neal admits there is little he knows from this period. He started in 1988 and insists that Rancherlo today does not endorse the methods described by Hope, Yarema, and Dumas. Jeffrey Pawson, their founder, is deceased and was away in California for much of the time the camps operated.
I believe in, and I know what the people that work at Rancherlo today believe in, and we certainly don't believe in treating people or children the way they described their experience.
Rancherlo may not condone those methods today, but Richard Yarema and Guy Dumas say that's the way it was in Wilderness Challenge. And so Yarema and Dumas traveled with us from Dauphin, Manitoba to the former Rancherlo campsite on Norbert Lake in northern Saskatchewan. It is here that they hope to begin healing.
That water's still clear, eh? Holy shit.
Wow, look at this.
Isn't it?
Yeah. As you can see, there are very few rocks because we collected them all.
Part of your punishment.
That was part of our punishment.
There we go.
This is the trail. This is the trail.
Look up. God, test of time, I never stood up. That's where I had my heart attack. And I felt my body leave up and go into there. And I remember looking up, and then I remember falling, just collapsing against the side. I had left my body, because I guess I was dead.
How are you feeling?
Cold, ice cold. I mean, I know I'm dressed warm. I was warm before I got here, but I'm just kind of vibrating inside. It's a lot to relive.
I don't know if I can do this.
Take your time.
There's a lot of pain in this camp. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of loneliness from family, and this way of life has taught us to forgive. I can only speak for myself. I let it go. I have to let it go. I'm almost 60 years old. I've carried this for over 45 years. And today I want to reconcile. I want to let go. And let this place be part of our history. And to all of you that are out there, if you ever see this documentary, that we've blessed the place, we've said prayers in the Indigenous way, and carry on with having a good life. And so with that, I do an honor song to all of you that are out there, including the staff members, the organization, everyone that was involved in making this happen here. That I sing this song to release that, to let it go.
I think I can forgive now, but I'm not going to forget.